Welcome to MOTS, where we'll be applying the Manzer or Mosi-Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative through a binary system.
Or MOTS! This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion advised. Hello and welcome to MOTS, where we're going to be reviewing Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer with Christopher Morgan.
Good evening.
Scott Lola.
Hello.
Cedar Mosi.
Hi there.
And Leah Behar.
Hello.
Who's starting off with the summary? I believe it's Steve.
I got this one. This movie is Batman Takes Manhattan.
I would like to add that it's also wonderful cinematography redeems poor narrative.
Alright. That's the ultimate title in the same way that Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance is the ultimate title to Birdman.
Alright, well, you seem to disagree with me, so let's get into the argument. Chris, the intro. What did you think?
I wanted to see this movie for a long time, and I didn't really get a clear-cut idea what the film was about, but everything I heard about it was very intriguing. So I went into this, intrigued. I think that's fair. But right away, I was completely immersed. It immediately took me, and then when the camera started its one long take, I mean, that was just, it was great. I give it a 1.
Scott?
Now see, I should give it a 1, and I probably will, but so this full disclosure, the second time I've seen this movie. I was much more impressed the first time, and I'm still going to say it's a good movie. But now, having just watched it again, it somewhat was a bit slow. Doesn't make it uninteresting. So maybe I'll give it a softer 1. It still is arresting because, yes, of the way we'll bring this up, the way it's shot. Like, that's an interesting, style. So it sort of, almost literally drags you along with it because it's a long tracking shot following, people down corridors, very narrow corridors, which makes for a very cool visual. But overall, because of that, they set it up so that you're watching a dude walk down in the hallway, but you want to know what he's doing and where he's going, etc. So,
but that's not the actual introduction, though. The introduction is when they have the quote appear at first with all of the lettering appearing at
that's
time.
Fair.
So I'll speak about that. But
all right, actually, you're right about that. So even counting that, so I'll give it a solid 1. Then you're right. Yeah, and you can speak about the quote.
As far as the way that I saw it, yes, that quote was the first moments of the film. I liked that. It was kind of a slow build-up. I didn't really know what was going on with the quote, but it was fine. Then there is this shot of a meteor crashing to Earth, which immediately cut off into the main character, Reagan, sitting cross-legged with his back to us, to the audience, in his underwear. And
floating in midair, mind you.
Floating, yeah.
I'm sorry.
But I was going to say, the first picture they showed...
That's the most important part.
I think you buried the lead there on that.
Before they showed the comet, they briefly flashed the dead jellyfish.
Yes.
That's true.
Yeah.
Which comes back around later. But, all these strange visuals right in the beginning really did bring me into it, and I really was hooked from the moment that we started. I wanted to know where they were all going, even though a lot of this stuff paid off in minor ways as far as the entire narrative went. I immediately wanted to know what was going to be next and where we were going with all these and that type of thing. So I'm going to give it a 1.
I'm torn, but I feel as though I will be torn on most of these questions because I wasn't as blown away by this film as I feel as others were, as I was expecting it to be. And one of the reasons is this question of that's the style versus the narrative, and that's where the question comes in for me because, yes, you are dragged along with the camera and you want to see where it's going, but you're forced to follow and you want to see where it's going, and I don't know if you want to see that because, exactly, whether or not you want to, there's no other reality, so you kind of just have to go along with that.
That's every film.
Yes and no. I mean,
but the way this one is shot,
you have to see it the way that the director wants you to see it in every film. It's just
that's true, of course,
it makes it obvious that that's what this film is doing.
Right. Okay, I see your point, and I mean, I'm not gonna.
Okay, sorry. I didn't.
No, you're fine. I just don't want to argue that. I want to stick to
answer the question.
Yeah.
Go on.
And so, right, you're following it, but is that good because it's a narrative, or is that good because of the cinematography?
That's fair.
And, even that quote at the beginning, I was just thrown off from it. The way all that went up, I was just just give me the quote. But
I would say it's matched to the music.
That was cool. But again, that's not narrative.
True. It's a visual effect, and said, that's right. I mean, I'll agree with that.
And I don't know. I wasn't really... I wasn't drawn in. I was just like really turned off by that quote. And then the guy sitting in the underwear, that was cool. He was floating, but then I feel like that didn't go anywhere. I don't know. I'm gonna have to go with a 0, actually.
I agree that if this movie were, if we were rating this movie based on style and cinematography, it would get a 10 from me. But we're judging it narratively. However, I think that the opening, more so than any commercial or trailer I saw for this, sets the tone for what this movie is. I was, because I'm kind of into cryptograms and all that, I was fascinated to try to guess what the quote was as letter by letter it was appearing. Then you have the meteor and the jellyfish and the quick cuts between those, and they are tied later into the story, and in fact the jellyfish much later into the story. And then having Michael Keaton with his pale white back and his paler Teddy Whiteys floating, it immediately intrigued me to see where this movie was going. I was excited going in to see this movie. I'd heard a lot about this. This was my first time actually seeing it tonight. But I have to say, like, I was with the movie right from the beginning, so I have to give it a 1.
I just want to basically add to what you guys were saying about the quotes, and Scott's point that, you know, it was with the music, and I'm going to give part of one of my future answers away. I often think that in a good soundtrack, and a soundtrack should enhance the film, it should never take over. The soundtrack should be a supporting character, and you should notice it and not notice it at the same time. I think when they set the quote up and they were doing it to the drum beats, I do very much consider the drum and the drummer, who appears twice in the movie, as a supporting character. So I'm like saying that already, right from the quote, it's establishing the film on more than one level. I don't know if it's going to change your vote, but that was my 2 cents.
That's fair.
Leah, anything to add?
That's a fair assessment. I mean, I in some cases do agree how music can be part of the supporting character and create something. But in this case, while that makes an interesting point, it's not going to change my mind. I just found it, like, unnecessary.
Well, I needed to say it anyway. So
No.
If I changed your mind, it was a bonus, but I had to say it. So.
All right, Scott. Moving on to tonal consistency.
I'm giving it outright run. Yes, it was tonally consistent. You're going to ask me what the tone was? So let me try to parse it all together for you. Again, it goes back to, you know, trying to incorporate the visual style aesthetic of the film into its narrative. I think it was an integral part. Like, the movie would not be the same without the way it was shot. Like, that's sort of like it's built upon that, and everything else falls into place following from it, I would say. So it's not quite a noir film. It's a character study, really. That's essentially what it is, right? And it's sort of, it gets like cheekily meta here and there about it, like making
here and there.
Like, all right, it becomes way more obvious, like at times where they basically lampshade it, but it's obvious throughout. Yes, you're right. I'll rephrase. It's, you know, about, you're gonna mock me for this, but yeah, it's the culture of basically, you know, film actors and those who are trying to be, quote, artists, and those who are just like in the Hollywood system, and that's like another major theme. We'll get into that when themes comes around. But regardless, it kept, you know, focused on those and filtered through via its character studies of those within that world. Therefore, it definitely is a solid 1.
I would agree. I think that it was consistent tonally throughout. There were certainly scenes that, not that they didn't fit the tone, but that perhaps didn't need to be there to make it a complete movie. It would have been obvious without those scenes. It would have been a complete film without them. But I don't think any of those scenes broke from the tone that the film was trying to take. You know, this kind of funny but dark take on, like, the world of acting and the world of and everything that's in the orbit of acting and, you know, putting on a play. So it's a 1 for me.
Leah?
I will agree. I'm going to give this a 1. It was really interesting. For me, it feels as though the tone was having your own perspective and being lost in that perspective of reality. And I really... and I love that, and I think that the way that the film is shot so much enhances that, and there's almost like handoffs of the film. and that it can't be an edit. So what has to happen is almost like a trade-off. Like one character is gonna walk this way and it's gonna stay, and then this character is gonna take on. And the way that creates a character study and have all of those revolve around each other to create something, which again is the meta of the creating a film or creating a play within itself, is how everything is going to revolve to work to make it together. And I think that was done very well, and it was done consistently throughout. While I might not have enjoyed how all those parts were done, that was consistent. They still did it.
I will agree for the. I feel it was kind of, although it was shot continuously, it was almost equivalent to a steady cam on a stage play, and the performances quite often felt. But no, it's I feel that it was the intention of it, and that the actors often acted like they were in a stage play, even though about people
about being in a stage play.
Kind of reminds me of Kiss Me Kate, where they're actors performing Taming of the Shrew. However, there's one section where he says he starts to lose grasp on reality. It becomes, for like 5 minutes maybe, an action movie. But they had set it up.
But that made sense.
They had set it up enough and this is at the point where he's really kind of losing his grasp on reality, that it didn't, even though it was a complete tonal shift, it was a sensible tonal shift, and I understand where it was coming from. And again, as Leah, you said that not everything worked well for you, but I understand it all, and I don't think anything was broken.
Yes.
Chris?
I'm going to definitely give it a 1. I took some notes too. We were all talking about the film was very much shot like a play. There was a steady cam version of a play. And the movie was, obviously not one shot, but they edited it together in such a way. But still, though, there would be times where they would do time passage in a shot. Like they'd go to the next performance and be a shot. But every now and again, they'd focus in on a hallway or focus on the night turning day. But in a way, if you're looking at theater, there's always those scene changes where the stage goes black or it goes blue, and there's a scene change. There's that moment going on. I thought that was this film. That was the way of doing it cinematically. So I thought even those things were like, they'd focus on that hall for like, before they'd start going down it, they're focusing on it for about a minute or so. I thought that added to the verisimilitude of like watching live theater. And once again, I was noticing the consistency of the music. And when they'd go into the theater, it would be more like they'd do more strings. It would be more theatrical. I try to pay attention to when the drums came in. But one thing I noticed, there was a very short cue at one point where the music started to change. I can't remember when it was, and this slight music cue was cut off by the drums. Like all of a sudden, we were about to go into this world, another world, whether it was
I'll tell you what it was. It was when he was on the roof and he was like music, and then the guy like grabs him, and as soon as the guy touches him, that brings it back to reality, shuts off the music.
Okay, okay, that's what I was thinking of. So I think the movie was extremely, in every way, shape, and form, a very well knit movie. So it's definitely giving a 1.
Steve-O, themes, enjoy.
And genre as well.
So I was going to address genre first, because I'm not exactly sure if this fits cozily into any specific genre.
Character study.
Or surrealism.
I don't
of
know.
some sort.
I mean, yeah. So this movie reminds me a lot of, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a Charlie Kaufman flick. Like it felt to me like adaptation, or like a being John Malkovich type of thing.
I don't know. I disagree. I disagree. I find.
All right, we can disagree in a minute.
Yeah.
However, I could see Charlie Kaufman writing a film like this, this type of character study where it kind of goes in and out, like messes with genres, goes from character study to action flick, and like talks about all the different parts of those. But as far as themes goes, I think that kind of the theme of this, and it's addressed well, is like going through all these different parts of the acting community, directing a play, acting in a play, being a celebrity or a film star, all those things. It's kind of about finding beautiful moments and how desperate all of those things are.
nice.
You know, the scene with Tabitha, the critic, in the bar, where he just goes nuts on her and like.
I actually think that was perhaps the best moment in the film.
I love that.
It's
I
one
love
of my
did
favorites.
too.
I really
and
like.
that's kind of where he. I feel like that's where Reagan, the character, becomes a good actor. You know, so I thought it addressed all those themes. I thought it obviously spoke to every one of those and had like a monologue for each one. You know, like for every type of job that you could have in there. In the acting community, in like a play, in a community that you're doing a play or a movie or whatever, or you're a critic, or you're a stagehand, or you're a reporter that's reporting on plays that are happening on Broadway. All those things were spoken to very obviously, but not in an obvious way, I guess. So that's me. I'm gonna give that a 1.
I think I need to talk this through before I
Go for it.
give it because it's okay. So in terms of genre, I see this as kind of a combination between, as we've all said, a character study and almost a surrealist film, in the way that it goes into absurdity and it loses all sense of like this one established reality at times. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that I'm almost as biased because I'm not a big fan of surrealist films, but I think it works interestingly well with what I see as almost a theme of it is like finding your place and finding where you're accepted and loved. And like for that, you have to have such structure and such like roots to some place that you like can create something in which you're grounded, but you're doing that theme in a surrealist film where you're like constantly losing your sense of structure and reality. And I mean, maybe I'm just bothered about how those two were opposed in my mind and I didn't like it, so I want to give it a 0, but like, I'm also kind of like, well, that's actually an interesting thing to put out there.
Isn't that what life is what I'm going to say.
Yes. And maybe I'm just so bothered because it's too much close to like home and you like don't want to like it, but then isn't that something good? Isn't that you have a right. You have a reaction to it, and while it's not like the most pleasant reaction, so I guess I'll have to give it a 1 because you have a reaction.
I have a feeling that this movie may be too clever for its own.
Or it's trying to be at least.
No, because there's so many different thematic layers to this that
But like it gets in its own way.
Yes, it felt very much like an insider critique to not only like the Broadway aspect of it, but like acting in general. And the one I mentioned earlier, the point where where his character Birdman actually shows up in this kind of action sequence and basically challenges the audience. Oh, is this what you want to see? This is what you're paying like money to see in other movies, and that kind of felt almost like an insult. Like
yeah, but it was supposed to be. I'll let you speak.
That's the issue. It's glad handing the people who want to. Like, oh, I'm more intelligent than people who go see these action movies, or it's an insult to it. So again, they have so many different kind of like thematic, and what works. Again, that part with the critic was brilliant satire, but I think it's juggling too many plates on the sticks at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think that it works more often than it doesn't. So I have to give it a 1 for that. I just kind of wish it were a tighter movie in certain ways, and maybe a little less self-congratulatory.
Alright.
Yes. Can I like ditto what you've just said? Because it works really well, but it almost gets in its own way in doing it, and you're just like off put. Like you just. Oh.
I wasn't sure what to give this, but I'm definitely giving it a 1.
When in doubt, Chris gives 1.
No, seriously, because it is a character study, and I thought,
But
hold on a second.
I want to ask you a question about that, though. This is one of the issues I have. As a character study, it's trying to make points about Michael Keaton's character, Regan
Johnson.
What was the point they were making?
I'm sorry?
What was the point they were making with Michael Keaton's character? His arc throughout. If it's a character,
are we going to answer? Do you want me to answer that, like for the protagonist question? Or do you want me to answer
asking for because thematically, what were the themes associated with his character as a character study?
All right, as a character study, the world through his eyes, like you had said before. With hey, is this what you want? Yeah, it was I wrote down the notes like, when it comes to comedy, I'm like, if you're not going to play it safe and do the drab, G-rated comedy or most network sitcoms, if you're going to make fun of if anybody, you should make fun of everybody, including yourself, or make fun of nobody. And and another thing that's really important about making a film is for the film to know what it is, okay? And to get to your point about Charlie Kaufman reminds me of like mid to late Robert Altman. In that case, there's a great air of pretension. There's a great air where like they think they're about more than they really are.
But that's what he says.
Yeah, but hold on a second. But no, but I don't think Birdman ever gets there. I think in a way it parodies that in a very effective way, because there's parts of the film that really ground you. Like when he's talking to Tabitha at the bar. Mm-hmm. When he first meets Edward Norton, times with his daughter, and then there's times where, in parts where like the crazier he goes, it goes to extremes. Whether it's envisioning a scene from his movie where like there's a mayhem in the city and explosions happening, like that was him talking to himself. I mean, that was like him like where the Birdman was like saying, hey, we could do like Birdman, Phoenix Rising, you're not too old to play this part. And then he looks up and it's just like imagining him in this environment where in today's film you need all the explosions and big action heavy scenes. But it always seemed to be like it would go as a character study, he himself was going through extremes, and therefore I think that's why the movie's going through extremes. And because of that, I'm definitely giving it a 1. I really wasn't 100% sure, but listening to you all, I think it was a character study. I think it addressed the themes, internal themes of what was going on, and I definitely give it a 1.
All that is very interesting, but let me tell you the right answer. First of all, the movie itself named its own genre. And yes, I'll frame it through this. I somewhat agree, to a lesser extent, to what E said. It's sometimes tries to be too clever for its own good. But by the same token, more often than not, I think it succeeds at doing that. It wants, you said something, Chris, it wants to parody itself. But when it does it well. 80% of the time, whatever you said, I think it does it well. So, when they get the final review, when he shoots his nose off at the end, the review says he has unwittingly created a genre called super realism, which is somewhat like I would describe it. And if you want to like reverse engineer what that term means, it's something what Steve-O said. It's a John Malkovich type of film where it's basically a quirky exploration of existentialism via surrealism. That's a long definition of it.
I like your point, and I have to say that I'm going to reaffirm my 1 for having the audacity to attempt this, but I can still be aggravated.
That's fair.
By
You certainly can.
pretentiousness.
You certainly can. And so I'll just one more thing, if not clear, my answer is a 1 for this question. And I'll bring it back to the scene you guys are talking about. Yeah, they're mocking everyone in multiple ways, which is something I'm going to be biased for. They're mocking you. This is what you want to see. Here it is. But we also have it in our film, so it's like we don't know we're doing it.
And it's also internal to the character.
Yeah, of course. And it's a layer of his own character as well, like spitting back the own the LCD opinions about what Birdman represents to the character. So, anyways. Yes, it's a character study, but as I said, it's actually super realism.
Yes.
The ending.
The ending.
Did it achieve its goals by the end? Or what goals did it have? Did you think it achieved?
I was just about to ask that question. What goal does it have? Because I think, Ian, you kind of pointed out when you asked, okay, we're all talking about it's a character study, but where is that going?
We learn about the character?
And I feel like that is missing. This, character arc of...
Regan?
Yeah, like he's the only, he's the main character. I feel like when the movie begins, the supporting characters, I feel, are much more present. And then as it goes on, we lose our sense of reality. It becomes him and him and him. But it is missing that arc, and maybe it's missing the point of the film to expect an arc, because maybe in surrealist film, there's not supposed to be those traditional narrative things. But I'm still kind of looking for it, and what I think is... parts of these films almost remind me of, has anyone ever seen Bamboozled? The Spike Lee film? Okay.
Yes.
So I feel like they do the same thing. They make fun of everything, and they make a mockery of it, and they lose the sense of reality, but they still have character development and character arcs throughout. And I was kind of disappointed, because I was like, it has been done in other films. And, it's done well, and I wanted to see that done here, and I understand maybe that's not part of surrealist film, and that comparison isn't fair, but that was just lacking for me, and because of that, it lacked a goal, so I'm going to go with a 0.
I'm going to agree with the 0. There's a quote in this movie when people are coming out of the theater on opening night, for the half
For the preview or whatever.
No, for
the first act.
After the first act, they go. I hope the second act's as good as the first act. And the first act of this movie was very good. Or maybe even if this is a 3-act narrative, the first 2 acts were very good. The third act let me down. And I if they're going for a character who is tragically spiraling down, spoilers, he should have died at the end. Mm-hmm. Having him recover, I understand the point they're making by having him recover by saying like, "Oh, here's the you're famous again for it." But then it kind of obfuscates the message, especially when he kills himself again at the end of the movie. Like maybe it's I'm unclear of where they wanted his character. Then I understand the final point they wanted to make, but it seems they let this character survive for no real purpose.
Thank you. Yeah. If he had died at the end in that shot and like sacrificed himself to the art and everything that he's been talking about throughout this entire movie, I'd almost have like respect for him. But the fact that he like lives, it's almost like obnoxious in some way.
And I think that perhaps I don't want to tell what could have been, but it just felt like the whole hospital scene and Zach Galifianakis' last part could have been done without him surviving. It could have been like him bringing the news to Edward Norton.
Or just reading himself. That's what you're saying.
Like a hit or something like that. And it just felt kind of it started to get more and more unfocused as towards the end of the movie, to its detriment. I mentioned this earlier in our break between seeing the movie and this, that if they had maybe trimmed 20 minutes off of this, it would have been a much tighter movie. But overall, I was disappointed by the ending, so I have to give it a 0. Chris?
Excuse me. This one I'm extremely on the fence for, because I don't think anything. Right, up until the hospital scene, I don't think there needs to be a minute cut. I disagree with you. The 20 minutes, but that's the point. That's what I was thinking tonight. I'm like, this film should end, and that's what I thought the first time. I thought the film should end when everybody's applauding and looking at him. However, there are certain things I like about the hospital scene, and one of the things I like about it is he shoots off his nose, and basically you go in there, you go, when they finally, the camera gives it from his point of view more or less, and then when they circle around to look at him, he's basically got a mask on, he has the beak on, and in that regard, I'm like sitting here going, at this point, I'm like thinking, well, he's become Birdman. Whatever that alter ego is, he's become him. He shot off his nose to kind of, in a way, like...
And he got a
to
beak.
spite his face?
To spite his face.
That was quite...
See, I may be talking myself now into 1, because I was actually going to give this a 0, but I'm going to hear what you guys had to say. I'm going to hold off.
All right, so you're passing for now?
Yeah, because there is a point in time where it's just like, part of me really wanted him to end... in the theater, having him all applause and then fade to black. But when it looked like, because of his cast and everything, that he in a way had become Birdman, his psyche, he had become Birdman, I don't know. I'm going to let you guys talk.
All right, once again, let me lay down the knowledge upon you all. It's a subversion of that. You're expecting that, right? You want it to be that he either shoots himself on stage, and that's the end of it. Like, that's his, like, final, literal, like, swan song, if you will, out of stardom. But they subvert that back again, and then almost double subvert it back again, like that.
Yeah, but it's being too clever.
Right, I know. I knew exactly what you say that because I'm going to bring that up. But I think in this case it works. Like it's almost right. They want you to expect that, but it becomes again. Yes, I'm going to be a little biased. It's almost a Phil K. Dick ending again. It's
I hate Phil K. Dick.
But I love him, so of course it's left completely unclear because the line between reality and his unreality has become the most blurred it's ever going to be, and they don't answer it. That's the whole point. Surrealism does not answer anything for you. So, therefore...
And thus, narratively, it doesn't work.
But it works for me. The narrative of surrealism.
Every story, even Poe stories that are unclear. You know what I mean? I'm just saying.
But it's
I see what you're saying.
No, okay. I'm going to refine what I'm saying.
Okay.
I don't need him to have died there. But I didn't need him to
have
survive and then kill himself again.
I get that too, but that's what I'm saying. Right? It's that they're I'm trying to say to go for like a double, triple, reverse subversion, which yes, maybe trying
What
to
a
be
twist.
too clever for its own good, but I still like the way, like, I appreciate the intent, and I think it works well enough that I'm going to give it 1 at the end of the day, just not as strong of a 1 for the other questions we've already answered.
So here's my question
Okay.
about this ending that, I think Chris made me think was, does he try and kill himself, or has his psyche been so altered that he actually thinks he's Birdman and he doesn't realize that jumping out of the window will kill him? That he actually
It's all
thinks...
completely metaphorical is what I'm going to say to you. Like,
So let me take a poll here. You guys all think he dies when he
That's
goes out the window at the end?
Yes. I
So
don't necessarily know.
he has jumped off a building previously in the film.
no, that was a
that
fantasy.
was
No, but
fantasy.
because at the end,
I know that was a fantasy.
Right,
What
so
made
you're
you
saying
think that
it's
this
unclear.
wasn't
What
a
if it was a
fantasy?
Because
fantasy?
Emma
Because,
Stone
yeah.
observing it.
There was
But
a
she
guy
actually
on the roof that goes, "Hey, where are you going?" as he's jumping off the roof. Like, it's having somebody there observing does not make it.
But she
So,
doesn't actually see, because she
looks up,
doesn't. She looks,
actually.
she doesn't look down. She looks up.
Well,
She
she looks
looks-
down
no,
at
she looks
first,
down
down
first.
in
First, but
terror,
doesn't
but
see it,
And then
and,
she
then,
looks
and then
up
she
and
looks up.
smiles.
Right, exactly. So,
Which obviously that's not a clear indication that she knows what the hell is going
It just
on.
goes back to what I'm
Like-
saying. They leave it unclear, and I think they in a way that I like. So therefore, I'm going to give it a positive.
I'm not
score.
sure he actually jumps at
I
the
like
end.
stories
does
that
he
are
jump
unclear.
I'm not
at all,
saying
or
he-
does he just take on the Birdman psyche and doesn't jump, but he thinks he's flying out the window
Right.
because
Is he still
he's
lying in the
actually
hospital
becoming...
bed?
That's
even,
what
like,
he's
with-
Yeah.
Anyways,
So I don't know, but
I've answered. So you guys
something to think about. I'm not saying that he's dead or alive at the end of it. I'm just saying that I don't think there's any way to tell.
So what's your score?
So when I first watched Birdman I went to a theater in New York and watched it a while ago when it was still out. I thought that when he jumped off the roof the first time, like that was going to be just an extended suicide scene, and that was going to be the end of it, and he was never going to
That's
happen.
what they want you to think.
Of course. Well, that's exactly what it was, and then they subvert it, and he runs away from the taxi. He was trying to get his cab fare from him. And then when he shoots himself on stage, I was like, yes, perfect, awesome. And then it came to the hospital room, and I was concerned about them not ending it when he shot himself on stage, and then you have the meteor again and the jellyfish. But I do like that last scene, and I think that having Emma Stone go to the window and look down and look up was a good final, shot.
Yes.
It was a good final shot for the film. It was a lot of it was and what I said before about finding loneliness and desperation, or finding beauty in desperation, and like finding these terrible things in like the muck and grime, like her looking down first and then looking up into the air. It was kind of a good like visual narrative ending to that, so I did like the end of the movie. I guess I'll give it a 1. That being said.
okay, I've
figured out
got
what to do.
I did, and actually I'm going to give it a 1. I do like the subversion of expectation, but thinking about it being a character study, when I was saying about the transformation to Birdman, whatever's going on in his psyche, Birdman's voicing that part of it. So at the end, when he tries to shoot himself, it was some kind of self-sabotage, but he wasn't ready to die. It's like he had to complete the transformation to Birdman. Now, as far as the hold on a second. As far as the ending goes, though, whether or not he died, if you assume that maybe at certain points during this film he actually did have some kind of superpower, that he was actually levitating, that's fine. I'm not really sure what to make of it 100%, whether he had actually gone to the window, whether he was in the, or jumped or whatever. But I think it was interesting. Well, first of all, 2 things. Number 1, I think he decided by the ending that he was Birdman. So whatever part of the psyche that had happened, that part 1. But the other thing is, both he and Emma Stone are both addicts. She was rehab. He's an alcoholic. And the thing is, in a way, if he did die, Emma Stone looking down and then looking up would just be showing that Emma Stone lives in her own little reality. So it could be taken as that. I'm going to give it a 1 because I do think it was a character study, and I do think at the end, Michael Keaton's character, by choosing to be Birdman, kind of completed his arc and left the possibility that what Emma Stone was seeing was part of her psyche or what.
I like that take on Emma Stone's last thing, actually. I never
do
thought
as
of it
well.
that way. However, what I wanted to bring up was, I don't know if anybody else heard this. I didn't hear it the first time I watched the film, but the last time he sees Birdman in the bathroom after he takes off the mask, as he's walking out of the bathroom, he says something like, quietly, see you later, fuck you. And then he walks over to the window. Which is kind of him being like, listen, Birdman, I don't fucking need you anymore. Or at least that's how I took it.
That's a really good point too.
But yeah, it's very quiet. Like, you don't really notice it, but he says fuck you and something else.
That's a good point, because he does take off the mask in the bathroom. That's true. That's a really good point. Okay, so he decided ultimately not to be Birdman. Either way, I'm still giving one. But that's an excellent point.
I didn't hear that line. That might change. That's fair enough. Yeah.
All right, so I'm giving it 1 for antagonist, and the antagonist, at least for Michael Keaton, is Birdman. And I'm not saying, like, I don't take it as literally he wants to be, or the character of Birdman wants to take over him. Birdman is representation of all his fears, all his, like, the fact that he doesn't feel he's relevant. It's the one good point in his life that he has, even though he says he was miserable during it. It's reminiscent of all that, like, self-loathing and hatred and all the negative, like, influences on his life. And I have one of those myself.
Get your own Birdman.
Although
following you around.
Yes. I have one of those inner monologues that is just vicious to me. So I don't think it was a conflict between him, like, going crazy in the sense of trying to adopt this personality. I think it's him dealing with just, like, low self-esteem and hating, like, his life, and he's so desperate to reach that point again where he can feel good about himself, because having people tell him he's awesome is the only way he can have self-worth. So at the end, he does reject that part only to murder himself. So I don't know if that's a good message. Maybe Birdman won in the end, as in, like, his depression finally took him. And you pointed out earlier that he's an alcoholic, and signaling of a person who's depressed and has that kind of thing. And again, to the point of the superpower type thing, it's a idea that someone who feels that they're powerless wants to have a sense that they have something powerful about them, even if it's magical. So this is all part of his, like, kind of depression, low self-esteem, and that's something we can all get behind, I think, at this table. Everyone's not looking at me. Chris, would you like to depress people further?
I'm giving this 1. And Birdman being a part of a psyche, whatever it represented, definitely, after listening to Steve, he definitely rejected Birdman, thus solidifying Birdman's position as the antagonist. Birdman was an effective one, and I'm giving it a 1.
Well, Ian stole a lot of my thunder, but I, of course, I was going to go my fallback answer, in that it's our culture or society is the real antagonist, or it's the celebrity culture specifically. But yes, I'm just going to quickly recap and rephrase. Reagan's antagonist, of course, is Birdman, but I like your interpretation. I think is what I want to lean to. It's basically the real antagonist for everybody, in fact, is insecurity in this entire film. Mm-hmm. Everyone's insecure about themselves and where they are and who they are to each other and to themselves even. It's an existential crisis. Even the critic. Yeah. Existentially, everyone's in a fucking crowd. And that's what, like, so I think that filters in through what we, like, the themes and so forth that we just spoke to. So I'm going to give it a 1, of course, because insecurity is insidious and you're never going to escape that.
So it's
a character study about that in many characters, but largely him, and then it cut up to everyone else.
So is the director's main theme that every single person in show business is an insecure wreck?
All right, I'll bring this up again. I'm bring this up again in dialogue, but there's a line that speaks directly to that, in very fact. Yes,
I'm going to agree with a lot of what both of you guys said. I think that Ian, you're right that the obvious and I guess concrete antagonist in this is his self-loathing in the form of Birdman. And Scott, you have some good points as far as, everyone in this film is bothered by their own, insecurity. So without, I don't have much to add to those, but I'll
give it a 1 though, right?
Give it a 1.
All right then.
I'm gonna have to agree with the 1. I think at first I was leaning towards a 0 because I didn't have a strong identification with Lance Reddick antagonist, and then as the conversation went on, I realized that, like, Birdman was an antagonist, and it reminded me of this, like, Jungian theory of the shadow self, and like the part that you keep hidden, and the part that is like your insecurities that you don't allow to the world. And each character of the film, I think, like, played somebody else's sense of like shadow and sense of loss and sense of like insecurity, and they were all that kind of like mirror. And in that way, like, everybody can be this antagonist to every other character, and in doing that, you really do get to what we're talking about, which is making a character study, which is just looking at how do people interact with each other to make reality.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah.
Michael Keaton, phenomenal actor or the greatest
Or
actor?
best
Yeah,
badass or Birdman.
Michael Keaton's definitely getting one. He was fantastic. I don't know much more to add. It's a character study, pretty much, where he's the central character. Everybody's kind of reflected off of him, even the pokes at the industry. He was fantastic as an actor, as a character. It's getting a very strong one.
I don't think anyone else can add much more to that. He was amazing in it. I guess ostensibly he's playing a character of himself, but if that's true, he's still played it spot on. He in fact, again, it's a meta thing. He lived it so he can play it easily. And he also, he had a great rapport with every other actor in the film, and he did a great job. Birdman, Screech won.
Do you guys remember what his character's name, what Riggins' character's name was in the Carver play
Mel,
that he was
I
doing?
think.
No,
Birdman.
Mel was Ed Norton's character.
Oh, it was okay.
Eddie.
Yes. All right. Throughout this film, Michael Keaton playing Riggin plays Riggin better as the film goes on. And having watched this multiple times, it became really obvious to me that was on purpose. He
Too clever for its own good.
He
again.
fills out his own character better as the play goes on, as Riggin starts to play
Eddie better.
in the in-film play.
It's recursive. It's rigging all the way down.
It's actually a really incredible job of acting, I think, and like it becomes better every time I watch it, because I realize more and more that like if you like really look at the beginning of this, Michael Keaton's good as Riggin. But he didn't start blowing me away until later on. After his thing that he does with Ed Norton's character, where he like tells him the fake story about his dad. He has a scene later on with his ex-wife that kind of mirrors it, but he actually starts crying, and he does it like so much
more
better.
convincingly.
Yeah, so much more less obviously. Like he quote unquote fools Ed Norton's character when he does it, but it seems kind of unconvincing at the time. And then he does a really good scene later on where he's talking about when he walked in the ocean and was stung by a jellyfish, where I thought he did a really convincing job. I thought that Keaton blew it out of the fucking water with this film. I thought he was really good, and
so one.
I'm giving it a 1.
To your point, though, the near where he confronts Ed Norton and tells him that story, that was kind of like him reversing the provocation that Ed Norton gave him at the beginning when he was like saying, "Hey, you have next 4 lines and you're saying the exact same thing," and Ed Norton's character provokes him into an emotion,
right?
And that turns around, and then it turns around again. So it's just like he's lived as the student, as that he surpassed the teacher, and then his reality of it.
Right, but I mean, I completely understood what the director was trying to do there, but
yeah, I was just saying that even that middle part was the mirror of the.
But basically what I'm saying is that, I mean, I think you know what I'm saying. Like, he got stronger throughout the film, and that was on purpose. And like acting well, and then going up to like acting amazingly is, I don't know, I'm not an actor, but I can't imagine how hard that is to actually do.
Just so you know, I was supporting your argument. I was giving extra credence to exactly what you were saying.
So are you implying that Michael Keaton tried killing himself in a Batman costume? Because that's slanderous, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Actually,
it's time we call the lawyers.
Yes, I know that was a joke. However, actually, there were some interviews with Keaton about this movie, and he's like nothing like the character in the film, which he's trying to distance himself from that mode of thinking.
Leah?
I don't know how much I have to add. It was well acted. It continued to get better as it went on. And that speaks to the characters and really the actor's ability to play into the themes and the goals, which is, the meta of it all and how it develops over time. And it worked again, I didn't like him. I found it like a very masculine point of view, but I'll speak to that when we go to supporting actors.
Mm.
But for him, I'll give it a 1.
I was originally going to give this a 0 because I was trying to think of what arc this character had, and I couldn't think of any until I recollected a scene where he's getting drunk, and this guy is ranting the speech from Macbeth, and I realized that it's supposed to be a traditional character arc of a protagonist. It's a tragedy. You're seeing this person fall apart. And then his death at the end, it makes even more sense. It's a culmination of every act, he's getting worse. And that really drives it home with we're all poor players on a stage. And considering that, even though I kind of think the ending diminishes the effect of what would be a very powerful character study, overall, Michael Keaton's performance uplifts this. So I have to give it a 1. All right, Scott. How are the supporting characters?
They're all amazing, so I'm going to steal your tradition and pick the one that I like the best, which is, of course, Ed Norton, who's amazing in every film, and he plays a great, I don't want to say smarmy, he plays Mike Shiner, who's the, sort of the up-and-coming hot ticket Broadway actor, but he's volatile, right? He's supposed to be really good, but he's, he messes, he causes trouble for the directors, for everything. The first thing they say about him, he got fired, or he quit his last play, or he got fired. And Keaton says, "Which one is it?" He goes, sort of both. You know how he is, and that's the perfect outside introduction to him. I loved him. His interactions were amazing. His opening scene where he's just like, let's do a bit of. He's fucking around with Michael Keaton, with Regan Thompson, because he's good at it. It's obvious that in this world he's a great actor. He's known, and he's even friends with the only reviewer that matters, New York Times reviewer, Tabitha. And he was my favorite, and some of his lines are just the snappiest, and he's dealing with his own insecurities. He almost could have been a secondary, a second protagonist, but not quite. He doesn't get there. But regardless, he's the strongest secondary character. That would get a 1 no matter what, and everyone else does a great job. Emma Stone plays perfectly fine. His other two, again, Laura and Naomi Watts plays Leslie, who's the fourth actress in the play, and who is Mike Shiner's girlfriend. So all that, they all did a very excellent job, but the one that blew it away for me was Ed Norton. I think other people are going to talk about another supporting character did a really good job, but this one's mine.
Yeah, I'm gonna not steal anybody's thunder, but I will.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Let me get one more. Ian also kind of rolled it up for again, but the other secondary favorite character I like is the man ranting the Macbeth speech outside the theater. He counts as a secondary character.
I was actually just going to say that.
Right. Yeah. Well, there you go. Sorry, I stole yours.
Yeah, I mean, Ed Norton's amazing. Galifianakis does an incredible job, which Ian's going to talk about more, so I won't take that. Just the guy shouting Shakespeare at the top of his lungs.
Horribly.
Outside, and as all Regan wants to... As Regan's walking out of the bar from just getting ripped apart by Tabitha, who is also a very good secondary character, by the way. I think that was my favorite part of the movie, just that guy, and then he walks past me, he's like, "Hey, where you going, man?" Just kind of breaks from it, and he's like, "Was it too much?" Echoing the guy from the beginning.
From earlier, yeah.
Just overacting the hell out of it. I really love that part. I did want to mention that I thought that Emma Stone was not as high caliber of an actor.
She wasn't, but she still did as everyone else
was.
What I'm saying.
Yeah, but
everyone else elevated this film. She did a fine job.
She didn't elevate it, but I completely bought it. It was believable, perfectly fine. There was nothing unbelievable about it.
Yes.
What?
I'll get to it.
We'll talk about it. All right. Sorry.
All right. So go
one
ahead.
from Steve.
I'll give it a 1, despite that.
Well, I agree that Edward Norton was great in this film. I have to give this a 0. I felt not just Emma Stone, but in general, the female characters were lackluster. And maybe that's just a problem of the film being mostly through a male's perspective and all the females kind of supporting it. But as a female, it's hard to have any connection to the film or to really enjoy the male characters when they don't really support him. They're just kind of like there to feed his own sense of self and his own ego. And even like his daughter who's just getting out of rehab, I feel like he could care less and like flaunts his drinking in front of her while condemning her for smoking. And Emma Stone just, while I love her as a human being, did not hold, I just was not blown away by those women. And to me that was overwhelming.
Emma Stone, again, did a fine job, but everyone else did such a better job.
It was noticeable. I agree with that.
Made
I agree
her
with that.
give a poor performance in comparison. And I think that I kind of mentioned earlier in our pre-cast discussion that I think that there would, if it was a different actress, perhaps there would have been a stronger.
She could have held her weight with the others.
Yeah, and it would have been a stronger female character. I'm not going to dwell on that point, though. I like Zach Galifianakis. I'm actually not a big fan of Zach Galifianakis outside.
But you are now after this movie.
But I thought he did a fantastic job of a performance. Edward Norton, and the problem I have with this movie is it's kind of self-indulgent. And I mentioned this earlier. Yeah. And the thing is, Chris, you said earlier that there weren't scenes to be cut out. There certainly were. They made all the points they needed to with Edward Norton's character and still had him in there to the point it started wearing on me. And I feel that, again, if they had cut out a couple of the extraneous scenes, it would have been a tighter film. And there's a number, like, the performances were great, but a lot of them were over the top. Sometimes almost unbearably
That's kind of
so.
the point, is what I'm saying to you,
But I don't care if it's kind of the point. If it makes me uncomfortable watching
fair.
it fails as a movie.
Completely fair.
Especially if it's not intending to make me uncomfortable. But overall, I have to give it a 1 because they were strong performances. I just wish it's going to be a soft 1. Right. So, though the one that pushed me over is the guy playing the drums that appeared occasionally throughout the film in random spots, who was playing the soundtrack in the background. I'm a sucker for that. So,
Chris, I like the musicians.
I'm giving this a very strong 1, and to rebut, the reason I don't think any of the scenes need to be cut is because when you create a world so complete, whether that's a major world or a minor world, supporting characters matter, and if they're interesting enough, I want to see as much of them as possible. And I don't think that any of Edward Norton's scenes took away from that. But I am going to give this a very strong 1. I love Lindsay Duncan. She played Tabitha the Critic. I think she's a phenomenal actress. And I think her, as Tabitha, her scenes, first with Edward Norton, where there's kind of a flirty thing, and he's like saying, what does it take to become a critic? It's just like, he's kind of like throwing it back on her. It's like, what did you do? What did you not do in your life to get this? And then she was kind of more in a defensive position. And then when Keaton was around, she was more of an antagonistic thing. So she had a different barrier on. I felt like she was stronger with Michael Keaton, and she was kind of flirting more with Edward Norton. Be that as it may, I thought all the supporting characters were really interesting. I really enjoyed them. Zach Galifianakis, I think he's a fine actor. I think he's just made shitty choices in movies. I stopped at The Hangover 1 because I hated it, but he's outstanding. I'm definitely giving this a big 1.
I just want to rebut your rebuttal for a second. More is not always better. The two best supporting characters who are actual characters in here are Zach Galifianakis and the critic. And both of them had very low screen time, and they were paced perfectly. And two of the most memorable characters in cinema are Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs and Dr. Strangelove in Dr. Strangelove. And both of them were on screen for I think Hannibal was 16 minutes and
something like that,
10 minutes for Dr. Strangelove, and they had more impact in less screen time. So that's my rebuttal to the rebuttal.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And I'm going to ask a rebuttal too. I feel like when the critic is speaking to Edward Norton has the power. It's a joke. It's a flirt. It's
but
like
that's
a
what I'm
sexual...
saying is it's just like they have this flirt, and then he attacks her. Like he breaks down her defenses and he attacks her. And then later on, when Michael Keaton's around, she's like not saying anything as he rips up her review in her face, and she just kind of looks at him and she's like, "I'm going to destroy your play," and walks away. I mean, it's just like there was some kind of attraction between her and Ed Norton. And he was trying to break her down the way
she had respect for Norton.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
but
the
be
thing
that
is,
as it may,
she says, "I'm going to destroy your film," but at the end, she walks out because the film gets a standing ovation, so she can't do that. So whatever power was there, it gets lost in that one scene that comes after. But her and Edward Norton, I feel like it's almost more of a mutual respect. It's, when are you going to give me a bad critique when I give you a bad
I want
performance?
to say that in dialogue. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They both confirm each other's snobbery.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
And
It
it's
was
more
like
of
a
an
flirt.
equal thing, and I feel like in the other way, it was a power grab. And
Despite the fact that
Just because I
Ed
said
Norton
flirt
and-
didn't mean like romantic. I said it was a flirt, though.
Ed Norton and Michael Keaton both say the same thing to her,
mm-hmm.
and she reacts in completely
With
different,
different ways, yeah. I
extremely
was going to say
different,
different dialogue, but yeah.
All right, speaking of which, Steve-O, dialogue.
I really, really liked the dialogue in this film. It was very snappy, it reminded me of like a play, which is what it was supposed to do, and it did that very well, I think. Anytime Ed Norton was on screen, except for the two scenes where he's up on the roof with Emma Stone, the dialogue sizzled pretty well.
But may I make a point to that? They even lampshaded that. Emma Stone says to him that was horrible. That's some Oprah shit. Like she says that to him.
Yeah, that's great.
Whether or
But
not-
all the rest of the dialogue while they're up there, while they're out there, is also bad.
saying-
Like I just don't.
Because-
I did not believe any interaction between the two of them was genuine.
That's fair, but
The
it goes
entire
back to
film.
trying to be too clever its own good again. Is all I'm saying.
No, I think it had to do with the fact that they had no chemistry as
Go
actors.
on.
But whatever. Regardless, I thought that pretty much any time Ed Norton talked, I was riveted. Michael Keaton had, especially as Birdman, like his own inner monologue was so spot on for all these doubts that you have in your own life that you don't talk to anybody about or say anything about, but it's the types of things that everybody says, like, oh, this is shit, what the hell are we doing here, that type of thing. I loved all that. There were a couple spots where it could have been better, but I don't think at any point it was bad, so I'm going to give it a 1 for dialogue.
Yeah.
I will agree. I'm going to give this a strong 1. It was witty. You laughed from the dialogue. The fact that they used lines twice and it was how different people say it and different things, I think, again, creates a whole world and ties it all in. The theme, the dialogue, all is created through the way that things are being meted and being brought back and being re-referenced. And it creates a world and creates a world of a play. And, for that, I will give it a 1 because it establishes reality.
Because I'm a curmudgeonly bastard, I want to give this a 0 because partly it's, again, too clever, that it's insufferable at times. At points, the delivery and dialogue is downright bad, especially when it comes to Emma Stone. At a point where I cringed at some of the sentences, the dialogue.
The truth or dare thing bothered the shit out of me. At
How-
the end, when she's
It's more
standing,
stilting now.
when
having-
she's standing in the doorway, like,
agree with
no,
that.
truth or dare.
I mean, that's
You
very
can't make
cliche.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Shut up.
All right, go on. Lee.
However, there was enough that impressed me that I have to give this, again, it's going to be a soft 1, but it's a 1 nonetheless.
More often than not, it was good.
Maybe not even that. There were a couple moments that...
Well, the standout ones overshadowed the bad ones.
I'll give you an example. Early on, Edward Norton's character and Michael Keaton are discussing how to deliver lines over in the set, and you see Michael Keaton give the same performance over and over again, but his delivery changes as he becomes more and more comfortable, and he's taking the advice given to him earlier, and it's never referenced again. So I, like, that kind of cleverness struck me as good enough. What worked. So I have to give it a 1. Chris.
I'm giving it a very strong 1. I thought the lines are great, even the ones that were cliche, like the truth or dare stuff. I mean, it's those are the weakest lines, but by the same token, there was part of this. If we're going to look at the full spectrum of the genres that they're floating through, you kind of have to have that corniness there, whether it was intended or not. It didn't take me out. It didn't diminish any of the other things that were strong about it. And I'm going to say I don't think this film at any one time thought it was too clever for its own good. If it was the way it was and completely incomprehensible, I do not like Charlie Kaufman films. I don't get them. It's something like that where they try to be so surreal and clever that they don't need to explain a lot. The things that we were discussing here, whether or not he killed himself at the end, those to me are minor things. I thought the dialogue really, as much as the camera and as much as the music, moved the film along. Just the rhythms of the dialogue whether it was like, trite like that scene with them in the balcony with the truth or dare, or whether it was them sparring with Tabitha or anything. Everything about the dialogue for me worked.
All right, well, I'm definitely giving it a 1, and you guys covered a lot of it. I'll just give you a couple of mine. Norton's diatribe to Tabitha, followed by Reagan's diatribe, or Keaton's diatribe to her, was a perfectly mirror, callback to each other. My favorite line, it's one of the rooftop scenes, but it's not the truth there thing. It's where Ed Norton says, "I pretend just about everywhere else, but not on stage." Like, that's kind of better. Like, it filled out his character. You probably thought you wanted him cheesy, but I liked it.
That wasn't on the rooftop.
He sold it to me. No, it was.
It was in the awning when, above the stage.
All right, well, either way, they're above everyone. But I liked it as a line. I didn't think it was stilted. I thought it was perfectly fine. They filled out his character to be that. So, anyways, I'm gonna give it a 1. Yes, it was more often than not snappy. Yes, I never actually cringed both times you've seen it, but I can see what you mean, what you say. Like, some of them are like a little flat, I guess.
To be fair,
but it's not enough to off-put me.
I am one of the most awkward people alive, so I cringe at even the slightest
yes.
thing of awkwardness.
Your own dialogue gets 0, but I'm giving it a 1 for this film. Go on.
I started.
Yes.
Yes.
Was your immersion ever broken?
Yes. I will agree with you when you say that there's a good 20 minutes that can be cut out of this film. And for me, whenever I feel like there's just scenes that are unnecessary or I don't understand their presence, it loses its immersion for me. So I'm going to have to go with 0.
Can I ask you guys, which scenes you would cut out?
I think I would cut out some of the rooftop stuff. The second truth or dare thing, I think, could have been cut out, and they could have just cut to them being sexual. I know you gentlemen seem to have liked it, but the part where he's running half naked through Times Square and he's doing that whole, I like that. I think it went on too long for me.
Cut that out, and it would change everything.
I was going to say,
it's an integral part of his character study.
I'm not saying cut the whole thing. I want to cut some of it out.
So you don't want it to be as long as this, but he's all right. I get it.
Yes.
So it could still happen, but it could be shorter, condensed.
Right.
A montage of that instead of an actual tracking shot, perhaps.
Right. Exactly. I feel like my problem is there are times where I think they could have made their point more condensedly and without all of the nonsense. And maybe that's the point of the film because it's like a representation of life, and sometimes you go through things are longer than you want them to be. But for me, it was just bothersome. So I'm going to go with a 0.
I think Leah just spoke for me there, so I'm going to agree with her on the 0.
I'm going to give this a 1 because I noticed this is the first time the movie transfixed me, and I can't ever look in a movie or music without taking it apart someplace in my mind. So I'm always deconstructing and reconstructing.
Birdman's talking to you while you're watching Birdman.
Yeah. But I thought the dialogue, the camera movement, the music gave this thing a rhythm. It has a flow like a stream. It goes and sweeps you off your feet in a lot of ways. There were a couple of times during the film where I hurt my knee and I really wanted to get up and stretch and everything, but I could not move out of that room. It's just I just didn't even want to stand up. Even though I had seen it before, even though I knew it was happening, there was never one moment in this film, even when the little pauses down the hall, looking down the hall, or looking up at the night turning into day, I never once thought that I couldn't miss a single moment of this film. So I'm giving it a very strong 1.
All right, fair enough. So here's the thing. It's kind of odd because the way it's set up, it's what will and won't you accept in terms of immersion, because it's obviously it starts off with elements of surrealism. So therefore, that means you're going to be seeing unrealistic things throughout the whole movie, or at least you should know that going into it. Once you see that. So, I think there's something I'll draw upon a rule that we've drawn upon before. Did it play by its own rules? I think it did. Therefore, it's going to be a 1.
But maybe this is a matter of perspective. I was getting bored towards the end, and certain
I wasn't.
scenes.
I wasn't
again,
even.
Certain scenes. I can't answer to your question earlier, Steve. Exactly what scenes I could cut out right now. I have to watch scene by scene again. But I remember thinking I saw this scene already. Could we move on to the next part?
I get it.
I was actually going to. I was about to ask you towards the end of it how much longer this movie is, and if I have to do that,
when you ask that question, then that's fair enough. That's perfectly fine. I get it. I understand. I'm just saying, and for me, they played by its own rules. I didn't think it was the first time, nor this time. There was nothing egregious about it that made me question it. Nor did I say how much longer is left. I knew how much longer was left, and I didn't seem, didn't seem too excessive to me. Therefore, even going again, it still was fine. So I'm giving it a 1.
So I've seen this movie times now. I think I mentioned that earlier, but the problem parts of it for me, and I love this movie. It was probably my favorite movie last year. The problem parts for me were those two rooftop scenes with Emma Stone and Ed Norton. They both broke my immersion, where I was not only were they kind of cringeworthy, but if I were to cut anything out of it, I would cut that whole thing between them. And that, all the romance between them, I don't think it really added much to the film in general. And other than that, my immersion was not even close to being broken. But because of those two scenes, I have to say that it was for this and give this a 0.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I'm starting off here. And this might be an unpopular decision, but I'm actually giving a 0 for recommendation.
I thought you might. But
the thing is, there are people I would recommend it to. They're the people in this room. If you're listening to this podcast and you're listening to a podcast based around narrative and analysis, you're probably going to love this movie. But I can't think of many people in my life that
What's the percentage of those people?
Yeah, I actually say, hey, you should check out this movie. I kind of feel that they would feel that I'm pretentious, and they already think I'm pretentious by record. It's almost like recommending a Terrence Malick film. Go watch Tree of Life, you'll love it. So I enjoyed this movie. Don't get me wrong. It's just that I don't know if I'll ever see it again. It's beautiful.
Well, you're answering one question versus another, really. Yeah. Did you enjoy it? Yes, but would you recommend it? You probably wouldn't because of the nature of it.
Yeah,
I get it.
I enjoyed it, but I wouldn't see it again. And if you're into cinematography, watch it. But I couldn't imagine how many people I'd recommend it to. Chris?
It's like anything else. It's subjective. So there are people I'd recommend it to, people I wouldn't recommend it to. But the greater question was, did I like this film? Did I enjoy this film? I love this film. I think I loved it more the second time than the first time. And I'd definitely see it again. Because I'm not even like just deconstructing it for themes as to decide like what everything was symbolic of. I'm really fascinated with the flow of this film, as I said before. I consider the music an integral part. The rhythm of the dialogues, the way everything was cut. I just love this film to death. I think it's gonna have like anything else. It's subjective to your own bias, but I would to the people I'd recommend it to, I'd give it a strong recommendation, and I love the movie, so it's a 1.
Again, so like I originally had an answer in mind, but you sort of might have got me with something. Did I like it? Yes, I did. Would I recommend it? Again, you're right. Like if I say to people, hey, you should see it, and they're like I didn't get it. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? What's so great about this movie? I could totally see people saying that to me. But I'm going to have to go, like, hardcore. Like, not hardcore, but what I want to say is, did I like it? Yes, I did. I liked it again the second time. And again, I might have mentioned this earlier. I caught a couple of things that I missed the first time, which, in fact, enhanced the movie to me. So overall, fine. Yeah, it's not for everybody, but I fucking liked it, so I'm giving it a 1. But you almost got me to give it a 0.
I wildly recommend this movie to everybody that I see, and I say, if you don't like this, then I'm better than you. To their faces.
You walk around as if you're Birdman, like, I'm better than you because Birdman's a good movie and you don't like it.
No, but I do just tell everybody that it's a movie that you should see at least once. It's one of those films, or if you like film, then you can appreciate it on a lot of levels. And if the point of it's difficult to do this question specifically in terms of narrative, because I enjoyed the narrative, but I don't think that was necessarily the point of the film. Like, I think this film was supposed to be a cinematic masterpiece, just a filmatic, beautifully shot film, and kind of it had this quirky, strange story about Michael Keaton's character, but that was kind of a vehicle for the cinematography and the acting that was going on in it, and this play that was inside of a film, and like all these different strange things that they were trying to do with it. But as I said, I recommend it to everybody. You should all see it. Anyone listening, watch Birdman. I don't know why you listen to this spoiler-filled podcast if you haven't seen it already, because that was a terrible idea.
And if you don't, we'll follow you around and tap you in the balls with a tiny hammer.
The tiny hammer.
Every day of your life.
Sorry. I will go with a 1.
I will agree. There are definitely parts of this I did not fully love and enjoy, but it does something different. It offers a new perspective, and I think intrinsically that's what film is set out to do. It's to offer you something new and to make you question and make you think and whether I enjoyed it or not, the film does that, and for that reason, go out and see it. It's worth a watch, exactly.
Okay, we're to the final scores. Start from the high and go to the low. Chris and Scott both gave it a 10. Steve-O gave it a 9. Curmudgeonly old Ian gave it a 7. And even more curmudgeonly old maid,
somehow,
Leah gave it a 6.
Which equals a
8.4, which I think is fair assessment. I mean, honestly, this movie is not going to be for everyone. And if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably already seen this or will enjoy this movie if you haven't. So go do it. Just don't show your grandmother. I don't think she would enjoy it.
She wouldn't get it. Don't see it with grandma.
It depends. You might have a really cool grandma.
No one has a cool grandma. Anyway, I'm Jonathan Ian Medzer with Scott Thurla.
Good night.
Stephen Ramosi.
Good night.
Leah Behar.
Evening.
And Christopher Morgan.
Good evening.
And go crazy.
This has been Von MOTS. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Music by Chris Morgan. Editing and engineering by Stephen Ramosi. This has been a Lost Signals production. All rights reserved.